are Hi friends, today we are going to see about the basics of communication. Actually, what is communication? In this modern era, without communication, nothing is possible. So people communicate with mobile phones and so on. So in olden days, the people communicate using the signs before the invention of your noise signal. But after the invention of the noise signal, they used different languages to express their views. So in this modern era, without the mobile phones, people can't live. So now we are going to see about what is the basics of communication. Actually, there are two types of communication. The data can be classified into analog and digital. So what is analog signal? The analog signal is nothing but the information will be in continuous, and in the case of digital data there will be a discrete size. So we can also say the analog data is of continuous values and the digital data is of discrete values. So in this next slide we can see the difference between the analog and digital data. So in the first table we are going to see about the analog signal. The analog signal is of continuous nature and the digital is of discrete nature. So the analog signal have some amplitude, that is having some continuous values, but in the case of digital you will get only zeros and ones. So we are classify the signal based on the continuous values and discrete values. So normally the people who speak is of analog form, and in the computer technology it will of digital form. So whenever you are processing any data, we should convert some analog data to digital and we transmit the digital signal, and in the receiver side we will receive the digital signal and again we will convert that into analog signal. So we will discuss the need for the conversions and all in the future session. So what is amplitude? The amplitude is nothing but the distance above the reference line. So in this line this is called the amplitude. In this slide we can call this as the amplitude, that is the distance above your reference line. So what is one cycle? It is a one complete wave. So we will call the one complete wave as a cycle. So what is a frequency? It is nothing but number of cycles per second. So usually we will represent the frequency in terms of hertz. So what is the how we will calculate the frequency spectrum is the frequency spectrum is defines the bandwidth of your different analog and digital communication technology. So here we can see two different signals which is having one of high amplitude and another one is having low amplitude. So the distance above the reference line which is of maximum is called as peak amplitude, and the distance which is below which is minimum above the reference line is called low peak amplitude. Similarly, we have seen that the frequency is nothing but number of cycles per time second. So frequency can also be represented as the rate of change with respect to time. So when a signal is having a short span of time, it is called as high frequency. But when a signal is having a long span of time, it is called low frequency signal. So similarly, if a signal does not change at all, its frequency is unity. That means it is kind of if it is similar to क्या क्लियर So if a signal is instantaneously varying, it is having frequency infinite frequency. So the phase describes the position of the waveform which is relative to time. So in this case we can see the phase of the first signal is 0 because it is relative to your reference angle. Similarly the frequency is same for all the signal. In the second the signal is of 90-degree phase shift, and the third it is of 180-degree phase shift. So what is data transmission? If you are speaking, how you can hear my voice? Is a kind of thing. If you want to throw a paper to a long distance, if you throw it directly it won't reach to your aimed distance. Yes, in the case of if you wrap the paper in a stone and if you throw it to a long distance, definitely that paper will reach. Similarly, if you want to transmit your voice to long distance, you should the voice signal is normally of low frequency, should be carried via carrier wave which is of high frequency and it should be transmitted. That is explained here. The voice signal which is of low frequency is carried by the carrier wave of long frequency, that means high frequency. So modulation is nothing but a technique in which the low frequency signal is impressed with the high frequency signals for long distance transmission. There are three types of modulation, that is amplitude modulation, frequency modulation and phase modulation. So in the case of your amplitude modulation, the voice signal is here and the carrier signal, normally the noise signal is of message signal is of low frequency and your carrier signal of high frequency. So for long distance transmission, the amplitude of the carrier signal is varied in accordance with the amplitude of the message signal. So the first one is the modulating signal and second is the carrier frequency. So impress the carrier frequency with respect to your modulating signal, you will get modulated signal. So that is explained here. So here the message signal is and the carrier signal are combined to produce the modulated wave. So that is called as amplitude modulation. That means if you are varying the carrier amplitude with respect to the message amplitude, that is called amplitude modulation. As in the case of frequency, the same, the message signal is of low frequency and the carrier signal is of high frequency. When you are varying the frequency of your message signal, when you are varying the amplitude of the message carrier signal with respect to the frequency of the modulating signal, that is called frequency modulation. The FM signal, you are having the maximum frequency at f if the peak amplitude is maximum in message signal. If your amplitude is negative, you will have low frequency. So this is called as your frequency modulation. That means the carrier amplitude is varied in accordance with the frequency of your message signal. So as in the case of phase modulation, similarly the amplitude of your carrier frequency is varied in accordance with the phase of your message signal. So you are having the maximum frequency at starting phase of your message signal, and it decreases as your amplitude increases. At the zero crossing level you will have maximum amplitude. So in this class we have seen what is communication, what are the different types of communication, and what is the need for modulation, and what are the types of modulation, and how we are deriving the how we are deriving the modulated signal. So in the next class we will elaborate, we will see what is modulation, how it is performed, and what are the need for modulation. Thank you.